All right, so Nepal's on your bucket list, huh? You're thinking about those incredible Himalayan mountains, those ancient temples, and that awesome culture. But before you even think about packing that backpack, we need to talk about travel insurance. This is your shortcut to traveling smart in Nepal. We've got all the info you absolutely need to know. We've been combing through articles like from Nepal Nirvana trails, Green Valley, Nepal treks, even traveler reviews, guides, you name it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people just assume travel insurance is a given when you travel internationally. But you might be surprised to know that officially, Nepal doesn't actually require it for entry.
Oh, wow. Really? That's kind of a surprise to me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a little bit unexpected. But, I mean, while it might not be a legal requirement to get you off the plane, let's just say it's super highly recommended.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're that friend who says no gifts for the birthday.
Right.
But, you know, you can't show up empty-handed. It's kind of a social disaster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And in this case, a lot of trekking companies and tour operators won't even let you join a trip without insurance.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, Nepal has some pretty remote areas, and
Yeah.
trekking in the Himalayas, that's not exactly a walk in the park. I mean, you're really pushing your limits, altitude's a factor, and things can happen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, we're seeing research that indicates this huge increase in insurance claims from Nepal, particularly for those adventure activities.
Oh, wow.
So let's, break down what are the key types of coverage that you really want to think about. And we'll try not to get too bogged down in the, technical jargon.
Yeah, perfect, because I am all about adventure. But insurance jargon, not so much.
Okay, so first up, emergency medical expenses.
Okay.
This is going to cover stuff like hospital fees, doctor visits, if you get sick or injured during your trip. And the general recommendation we found was at least $50,000 in coverage.
Oh, okay. Got it. So, if I eat something that doesn't agree with me, or maybe I twist my ankle while I'm trekking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's where things get really important and even more expensive. We're talking medical evacuation. So this is specifically about getting you to a good medical facility if there's a really serious emergency. And the recommended coverage for that is $100,000.
$100,000? Why so much?
Well, just imagine if you needed to be rescued by a helicopter from, Everest Base Camp.
Right?
You don't want to be stuck with that bill.
No.
And it really highlights how these two are different. Emergency medical covers treatment on the ground during your trip, while medical evacuation is about getting you to safety, sometimes by air, for those really serious situations.
Okay, so one is for patching me up there, and the other is for getting me patched up somewhere else if things are really bad.
Exactly.
Okay, it makes sense and definitely worth the investment. But what about other stuff that could go wrong? What if my trip gets canceled? What if I lose my luggage? Or even some kind of emergency back home? Do I need insurance for that too?
Yeah, these are all really important things to think about. And a good, comprehensive travel insurance policy should cover a whole bunch of scenarios. All those things you just mentioned, plus things like lost passports, maybe even legal assistance.
That's like a safety net, knowing you're not totally on your own if something goes wrong.
Exactly. But here's something really, really important, especially if you're headed to those amazing Himalayan heights. Altitude matters.
Wait, so my regular insurance might not be good enough at high altitudes?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
So I could literally be, left high and dry.
Yeah, you could. A lot of standard policies have altitude limits, meaning you might not actually be covered if something happens above a certain elevation. So, imagine you're at Everest Base Camp, you need to be helicoptered out, and your insurance is like, oh, sorry, we don't cover rescues above 10,000 feet.
Oh my gosh, don't even want to think about that.
Right.
Okay, so rule number 1. Double check the altitude limits on my policy.
Got it.
Yeah.
What else should we know about picking the right insurance company? I mean, there are so many out there.
Oh yeah, tons. In our research, we came across a few that, kind of stood out.
Okay.
One of them was World Nomads. They're pretty popular with adventurous travelers, especially for things like trekking, mountaineering, those sorts of activities.
Okay.
They seem to have really comprehensive coverage, but their reviews were kind of mixed when it came to how quickly they process claims.
Oh, interesting. So great for adrenaline junkies like me, but maybe not so great if you actually have to, file a claim quickly.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And there's another important point about World Nomads, and this actually goes for any company, really. Premiums can change.
Right.
And we found some info that suggests World Nomads has actually had a pretty big price increase recently. Probably because more people are filing claims from Nepal.
Okay.
In fact, get this, claims from Nepal jumped from 15% of their travelers to 60%. Oh, wow, that is a huge jump. Definitely something to keep in mind when you're comparing costs. So are there any other companies we should be looking at?
Yeah, definitely. We also came across ING.
Okay.
They're kind of a big player in the travel insurance world. Lots of different plans, 24/7 support.
Mm-hmm.
They even have their own medical staff,
Oh, wow.
which could be helpful, in a pinch. But they also had some mixed reviews. Some people were saying they had some issues with their claims being denied or delayed.
Right.
So it's always a good idea to check a few different sources to get a, balanced view.
Yeah, sounds like reading between the lines is really key. What about companies that are like specifically for trekkers in Nepal?
There are a few that focus just on that niche. One we found was Nepal Trekking Insurance. And as the name suggests, they specialize in coverage just for trekkers.
Okay.
And they even have a support team based in Kathmandu.
Oh, that's amazing to have someone right there in Nepal who knows the healthcare system.
Yeah.
That could be such a game changer. Are there any other options?
Yeah, we also saw Travel Guard. They may not be Nepal specific, but they're known for having pretty good customer service, especially when it comes to those travel delays and disruptions.
Oh, so many options. It can feel a little bit overwhelming. What's the biggest takeaway we should have when it comes to choosing insurance?
Well, I think the key is that while travel insurance might not officially be required to get into Nepal, it's absolutely essential for anyone traveling there, especially if you're going to be doing trekking or, adventure activities. Don't be that person who ends up with a medical bill that they can't pay or who gets stuck in some tricky situation with no support.
Couldn't agree more. It's just not worth the risk. Okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Cost. How much we're going to have to shell out for all this peace of mind.
Right. Well, that's a great question. And this is where things get a little bit more, personal.
Mm-hmm.
Premiums are going to depend on things like how old you are, how long your trip is, what activities you're doing, and even, if you have any pre-existing health conditions.
Okay, that makes sense. So a younger, healthier person just chilling in Kathmandu for a week probably won't pay as much as someone who's planning to trek to Everest Base Camp and, has a history of knee problems.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay.
But even with all those variables, we did find some average numbers.
Okay.
The research suggests the average premium for a Nepal trip is around $285. But that number can vary a lot, with some travelers paying as little as $7 a day, while others could be paying way more.
No, that's a pretty big range. Sounds like, shopping around and getting personalized quotes is definitely the way to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't just assume that one company is always going to be cheaper than another. It really does depend on you.
Okay, got it. So let's say we've done our research, we've compared policies, and we're ready to buy.
Yeah.
Any insider tips we should know before we actually click at that buy button?
Oh, yeah, for sure. A few things that, seasoned travelers recommend. First, read the policy details. And really read them. Don't just skim.
Yeah.
Make sure you understand what's covered, what's not covered, and how to file a claim.
Right.
You don't want any nasty surprises if you actually have to use it.
Right, because nothing ruins a trip faster than realizing, oh, shoot, I'm not covered for this thing I thought I was.
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Another one. Buy your insurance early. Don't wait till the last minute.
Yes. Why is that so important?
Well, you want to be covered in case something unexpected happens before your trip even starts, right?
Right.
Like what if you suddenly get sick or there's a family emergency and you have to cancel?
Right.
Also, some policies have waiting periods for certain types of coverage, pre-existing conditions, for example.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, the earlier you buy, the better.
Okay, good to know. Procrastination can really backfire when it comes to travel insurance. Any other pearls of wisdom?
Okay, one more. Always carry a copy of your policy with you, both a digital copy and a printed copy. And make sure someone back home has a copy too, just in case. And especially if you're doing any high-altitude trekking, really make sure your policy covers helicopter evacuations.
Yeah, makes sense. A helicopter ride down a mountain is definitely preferable to a bumpy stretcher ride. Anything else?
One last thing. If you can, try to choose a company that has a support team based in Nepal.
Oh, okay. And what's the benefit of that? Because most companies have a 24/7 helpline. Right?
Could do, yeah. But having a local team on the ground, that can be so valuable in an emergency. They know the local healthcare system. They can help you if there are language barriers.
Right.
They can even advocate for you if you're having trouble getting the care you need.
That is so true. In a foreign country, especially one as unique as Nepal, I mean, having someone who knows the ropes could be so helpful. Now, speaking of navigating unfamiliar territory, let's dive into some real-life scenarios you might encounter in Nepal and how having the right insurance can really make all the difference. Okay, so let's say I'm actually trekking, like in the Annapurna region, and I have a little bit of a tumble. I twist my ankle, and it's pretty bad. I can't walk, and I'm miles from the nearest village. What happens?
Well, that's where that medical evacuation coverage we talked about really comes in handy.
Okay.
In that situation, you'd call your insurance company's emergency assistance hotline, and they would sort out getting you a helicopter to take you to a medical facility so you can get treatment.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. But what if it's not an injury? Like, what if I get altitude sickness?
Yeah, altitude sickness is a pretty common concern for trekkers in Nepal, and it's definitely something your insurance should cover. If you start to feel those symptoms, like the first thing you should do is get to a lower altitude. But if things get really bad, you might need to see a doctor. And that's where having that good emergency medical coverage is so important.
But what if my policy has an altitude limit and I'm above it when I get sick?
That's why it's so important to look at those altitude limits before you buy a policy.
Right.
If you're planning to go above a certain altitude, you want to make sure your insurance is actually going to cover you.
Right.
Otherwise, you could be on the hook for some really expensive medical bills or even evacuation costs.
Okay. All right. Lesson learned. Check those altitude limits. But let's switch gears for a second. What about stuff that's not a medical emergency? Like, what happens if my luggage gets lost on the way to Nepal?
Ugh, lost or delayed luggage, that's a travel nightmare.
Yeah.
But travel insurance can definitely help out there. If your bags disappear, you can file a claim with your insurance company, and they can cover those essentials you need while you're waiting.
Okay, good to know. So it's not just about medical emergencies. It's like about having that backup for all those little travel hiccups.
Exactly.
Okay. So what if something happens back home? Like, what if I have to cut my trip short?
In that case, you'd need what's called trip interruption coverage.
Okay.
So if there's a family emergency, an illness back home, or anything else covered that makes you cut your trip short,
Yeah.
your insurance can actually reimburse you for the part of your trip that you missed.
Oh, okay. So it's like having a backup plan for the unexpected, even when the unexpected is happening, thousands of miles away.
Right.
Okay. And now we were talking earlier about different insurance companies. You mentioned having that local support in Nepal, how that can be a really big help. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Imagine you need to see a doctor in Nepal, but you're having trouble explaining what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe figuring out how their healthcare system even works. That's when a local support team can really make a difference.
Right, because it's like having a translator and an advocate and a guide all rolled into one.
Exactly. They can help you find a good doctor, they can explain your coverage, and they can even help you negotiate medical bills. They're just an amazing resource, especially in a place like Nepal, where things might be really different from what you're used to.
Yeah, that kind of support can make a big difference. Like, take away a lot of stress and anxiety, especially if you're dealing with a medical situation in a foreign country.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, I know you mentioned, like, reading the fine print of your policy is so important. Are there any things people should really watch out for, like common gotchas that might catch people off guard?
Oh, that's a good question. One thing that trips people up a lot is coverage for pre-existing conditions. A lot of policies require you to buy like a special add-on or tell them about any pre-existing conditions when you're buying your policy,
Oh.
if you want them to be covered.
So, like, if I have, say, asthma and I have an asthma attack while I'm trekking, I might not be covered if I didn't mention that when I bought my policy.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
It's really important to be upfront about any pre-existing conditions so you know you're actually going to be covered.
Okay.
Another common one is coverage for certain adventure activities. So some policies don't cover stuff that's considered higher risk, like mountaineering or whitewater rafting.
Gotcha. So if you're planning to do anything more exciting than, like, a nice stroll around Kathmandu, you really want to check the policy details to see what they do and don't cover.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And make sure you understand how the claims process works.
Mm-hmm.
Know what you need to provide, how to actually file a claim if something happens.
Right.
It's always a good idea to keep copies of your policy, your receipts, any medical bills, like anything important. Keep it all organized and somewhere you can easily find it.
It sounds like being organized is key, not just for, like, peace of mind, but also for making that claim process go as smoothly as possible if you actually have to use it. Okay. So you've shared so many great tips and insights here. But if you could boil it all down to one piece of advice for travelers headed to Nepal, what would it be?
I think the most important thing is just don't underestimate how important travel insurance is.
Okay.
Nepal's an incredible country. There's just so much to see and do, but it comes with its own risks and challenges.
Right.
Having the right insurance can give you that safety net so you can focus on enjoying your trip, making memories, and not worrying.
Beautifully said. It's all about that peace of mind so you can really embrace the experience. Now, before we wrap things up, any final thoughts or words of wisdom you want to share with our listeners who are getting ready to go on their own Nepali adventure?
I think the biggest thing is to remember that travel insurance, it's an investment.
Mm,
It's an investment in you, in your health, your well-being, your peace of mind. Don't wait until something goes wrong to realize you should have gotten it.
right.
Do your research,
Mhm.
find a policy that works for you, and then get out there and experience Nepal knowing you're protected.
Yeah, well said. It's about being prepared, not paranoid, and having that confidence to embrace the adventure, knowing you've got that safety net in place.
Wow, so we covered a lot of ground here. We talked about all the different types of coverage you might need. We talked about those altitude limits and even like some real life examples of where insurance can, save the day. It really sounds like having the right insurance is just key to having a stress-free Nepal trip.
Absolutely. And, it's not even just about protecting yourself from, like, those financial burdens. It's about having those resources and that support when you need it most.
Hmm.
Whether it's medical evacuation or helping you figure out a foreign healthcare system or even just giving you some advice when you're stressed out, travel insurance can be such a game changer.
Yeah, it's like having a guardian angel,
Yeah.
looking out for you, especially when you're so far away from home. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And the best part is peace of mind doesn't have to be super expensive. Like we were talking about, there are policies out there that fit everyone's budget, no matter what kind of traveler you are.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about doing your research, looking at the different options, and picking the policy that works for you, for your needs, and for what you're planning to do.
Exactly. Don't wait until the last minute to think about insurance.
Right?
Take your time, really understand what you're getting, read all that fine print, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
The more you know, the better you'll be able to pick the right policy and travel with confidence.
So, to all you adventurers out there getting ready to go to Nepal, don't just dream about those Himalayan mountains and temples. Take that step to protect your adventure and your peace of mind. Get that insurance, do your research, and get ready for an amazing trip.
Safe travels.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into travel insurance for Nepal. We hope this has given you the info you need to plan your trip with confidence. Remember, your safety and well-being are paramount. Until next time, happy travels.